My name is Carlos Mendoza, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story, it's a memory of how God stepped into a place of despair and changed my life. I felt death so close I could hear its very silence. That day in Reynosa felt like so many others. Dust in the air, bustling streets, and a heat that weighed heavily on my bones. But something inside me knew nothing would ever be the same. It was May 2022. I left home early, my mind racing with the math test I needed to finish. My mother, Maria, always so determined, had given me breakfast. My little sister, Laura, was complaining about her lost school book, small everyday things that now seem sacred. When she hugged me, I felt the power of that gesture, never imagining it would be my last hug for a long time. "Come back soon," she said. I promised I would. I walked my usual route, 3 blocks east to Don Pepe's, then along Constitucion. I knew every rock, every hole. Perhaps because I knew it too well, I didn't notice the stairs following me, nor the dark van parked half a block away. Violence here is so commonplace that sometimes danger disguises itself as routine. It shouldn't have been this way. In a second, everything changed. Firm hands, a cloth draped over my head, my breath gasping. I fought back, biting, struggling, feeling breathless blows. They dragged me to the car as if I were just another disposable object. As they pushed me into the darkness, I heard that dry warning. If you speak without permission, you die. They'd heard that corner of fear their entire lives. Threats against my family, promises of pain if I didn't obey. It was brutal and precise. The kind of fear that shapes you from the inside out. Trapped in that silence and the smell of forced travel, I began to remember simple things. My sister's laughter, my mother's calloused hands sewing, the classes at the technical school I so desperately wanted to finish. It was strange. The fear was accompanied by an inner clarity, a sense that I wasn't completely alone. Amidst the despair, my memories turned to prayer. Not a pretty prayer, but a sincere request. Lord, if you exist, I need you now. There wasn't a miracle like the movies depict, blinding lights, opening doors, but I felt something real, peace in the midst of fear. God's presence didn't take away the immediate pain, but it gave me the strength to endure. In that time of darkness, I began to hear rare conversations, approaching footsteps and whispered orders. I learned to calculate stillness, to swallow answers, to feign apathy to buy time. Each small sigh was a prayer in disguise. Hours later, it felt like days. A window of opportunity opened. It wasn't a master plan of mine. It was a movement that seemed to come from outside me. There was a distraction, a moment when the kidnapper's nervousness betrayed them. I seized it. I ran without thinking. I ran like someone returning home for the first time in a long time. It wasn't an escape without scars. I arrived with a bruised body and a wounded soul, but still breathing. Returning home wasn't the end of the problem. Fear continued to haunt me. Anonymous phone calls, stares on the street, sleepless nights. But something in me had changed. That prayer in the car left a permanent mark, a thread of faith that began to pull my life elsewhere. I sought out the neighborhood church, a modest community, but full of people who prayed with the voice of their hearts. It was there that I found welcome. People who didn't ask, "Why did you come back?" but extended food, a listening ear, and constant prayer. Over time, I transformed pain into purpose. I returned to my studies, got support to finish my training, and began working on small improvements in the community. Repairs, tutoring for young people, and discussion groups about prevention and choices. I didn't become a hero, just a man who chose not to let fear define his life. I learned to forgive, not to forget what happened, but to free myself from the burden that was preventing me from living. The faith that has grown within me is not a theoretical belief. It is practical. It is the hand that lifted me when I could not stand. It is the mother who wiped my tears, the sister who hugged me without question, and the church that held my hand when I trembled. Today, when people meet me on the street, they don't always see the scars, but they are there, reminding me of the value of each day. If you ask me what I've learned, I'll say, life is fragile, yes, but also surprisingly resilient when we place our trust in something greater than ourselves. In Tamaulipas, many people grow up with fear as their companion. I don't want my story to be just another number. I want it to be proof that even in the darkest corners, God's light can enter, not always erasing the darkness immediately, but providing steps of hope that lead to healing. I don't know what the future holds, and there are days when the memory of that car comes back strong. But today, I choose to continue. I choose to live with purpose, to look into my mother's and Laura's eyes and be grateful. And if you're listening to this and carrying a fear that seems invincible, I say to you, seek it. Ask for help. Find a community. Allow yourself to believe that transformation is possible. God reached me in a locked car in the heat of despair. He can reach you wherever you are. My name is Carlos Mendoza. I'm not perfect, I'm afraid. I make mistakes. I fall. But I keep going because I've been touched by something bigger, and I want my life to tell the story of hope, even where we least expect it. Every morning we got up for school. Every time we went out to play ball, every laugh seemed to struggle against the constant backdrop of fear. This tension, the attempt to live a normal life with terror always lurking, was what brought me to that day on the Victoria-Monterey Highway. It was there, in that time of captivity, that I learned that there are forces greater than armed forces, and that silence sometimes can be a weapon of survival. Early on, I understood the cruel rule that governed that place. Noise killed. Screams attracted violence. Pleas turned to mockery. Crying provoked more cruelty. So I learned to swallow my fear, to hold back tears, to lower my gaze. I became an expert at existing unnoticed, at remaining whole inside while my body was trapped. "This boy learns quickly," I heard one of them say on the second day, referring to my forced calm. "He'll last longer than the last." I didn't even know what last meant until the routine of that place taught me. The house where they kept us looked ordinary from the outside. Peeling paint, rusty fence, skinny, barking dogs. But inside, it was a hellish hallway. There were other boys, some whose ages broke my heart. The youngest must have been about 11. His eyes so empty, nothing else seemed to fit in there. A man called the Rigid One, with scars on his face like maps of pain, spoke to me as if delivering a verdict. "You belong to the commander now. Your old life is over. If you cooperate, perhaps one day you will see your family." The threat was clear and as concrete as the walls that imprisoned me. The first few days were a lethal mix of indoctrination and violence. They forced us to watch the brutality while we ate. To get used to it, they said. They made us clean blood off trucks, to get rid of the disgust. They trained us to exhaustion, and when we fainted we received screams instead of compassion. One morning the strict man pulled me aside and stared at me. "You look like a good boy." Those words weren't praise. They were a sentence. They said I would be turned into a guard dog for the north side, near the schools. Being a watchdog was a surveillance job, keeping an eye on the streets, recognizing faces, noticing cars, warning about movements by authorities or rival groups. They gave me a disposable phone and a list of codes. Pasal for municipal police, another word for the National Guard. Familia Toda for a military convoy. I was placed near where I had grown up, a cruelty calculated to remind me every second of what had been taken from me. The training was methodical and brutal, memorizing license plates, patrol patterns, vehicle types, relaying information quickly and without error. He messed up once, and the beating followed. "One mistake could cost many lives," they repeated, with no humanity behind the phrase. Living there meant learning to transform small acts into survival, feigning normalcy, asking the wrong questions as if they were right, lowering my head when cars that had previously been indifferent to me passed by. And while my body obeyed those vile orders, something inside me resisted. Amidst the hardship, memories of my family, the mother who sewed until late at night, the sister who laughed at the same bad jokes, emerged like a flame. These memories became prayers. It wasn't a flowery prayer. It was a raw plea. "God, if you exist, hold me." I don't promise cinematic miracles. There wasn't a movie scene with doors flying open. But within that fear, I felt a peace that didn't come from within. It was a presence that calmed the despair and gave me a thread of hope to hold on to. And it was this hope that, days later, made me seize a distraction, a moment when my captor's arrogance and haste betrayed them, and run. The escape was ugly, scarred, and without guarantees. I returned home bruised, my spirit wounded, but breathing. Returning didn't end the fear. Anonymous phone calls, heavy stares, sleepless nights. But something had changed. That prayer in the car, That peace in the midst of despair opened a door to healing. I sought out the neighborhood church, a simple place with people who truly prayed, and there I found an outstretched hand, food, a listening ear, and comfort. Rebuilding was slow. I returned to technical school, got involved in small projects for the neighborhood, and tutored young people who, like me, were growing up between the love of family and the shadow of danger. I didn't become a hero, just a man who refused to let fear dictate the rest of his life. I learned to forgive, not to erase what I'd experienced, but to avoid carrying that useless burden. The faith born in that closed car is practical. It's lifting someone who falls, offering a snack, praying with someone who cries. The scars remain, some visible, others hidden in memories. I'm still afraid. I bite down on that fear from time to time. But I choose to live with purpose, to look into my mother's and Laura's eyes, to be grateful for each day, and to work so that other children don't have to learn the cruel rules I learned alone. If you, listening to me, carry a fear that seems invincible, I say, seek help, find a community, allow yourself to ask. God reached me where hope seemed slim, and He can reach you too. My name is Carlos Mendoza. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I fall, and I'm afraid. But I keep going because I was touched by something bigger, and I want my story to serve as a reminder that even in the darkest corners, there's room for light to shine through. The threat was constantly in the air. If we lose people or goods because of you, you will pay tenfold. It was a warning that would become a terrible reality. One day, they took me to a basement, where I saw a young man tied to a chair, covered in blood. He couldn't have been more than 20 years old, but his mistaking a patrol car for a regular car, had cost him a significant shipment. The rigid man, with his implacable coldness, explained, "Now you will learn what happens when you disappoint us." What followed was something my mind tried to block out, something no human being should ever witness. The young man, begging and crying, lost his dignity before losing his life. His incoherent moans echoed in my mind for weeks. I stood paralyzed, unable to look away, unable to do anything but be a mute witness to an act of brutality. "We chose him for his studious and innocent face," said another boy, the one who had been there the longest. "No one suspects a boy in a uniform and a backpack. You're invisible until you're not." And this invisibility, this illusion of anonymity, was what kept me alive, at least for a while. For weeks, I spent up to 8 hours a day standing on street corners, pretending to wait for the bus or do my homework. I saw my old classmates pass me by, even my teachers like Mr. Herrera, who asked about my absence but didn't recognize me. They were so close I could hear their conversations, but there was something between us that separated us, an invisible abyss, and if I tried to cross it, everyone would pay the price. The hardest moment was when I saw Mr. Herrera for the first time after my kidnapping. He passed within 10 feet of me, looking directly at me, but without recognizing who I was. How could he? In just a few weeks, I had lost over 20 pounds. My skin, once a healthy complexion, was now pale and bruised. My eyes, they said, were like those of a cornered animal, lost, empty. "Your mother and little sister are still in the same house as always," the stern man reminded me. "Every morning we have pictures of them coming and going. We haven't seen them in 2 days. It would be a shame if we had to visit them to make sure they were okay, wouldn't it?" The threat was constant. To reinforce their fear, they occasionally showed me photos. My mother collecting clothes from the clothesline, Laura waiting for the school bus, even my grandmother leaving church on Sundays. The message was clear. They could arrive at any moment, and any wrong move on my part could put them at risk. One evening, after a particularly long day, I found the stiff man waiting for me. He had a peculiar smile on his face, as if he'd just played a game and wanted to show me the prize. "Here, a gift," he said, tossing a small plastic bag toward me. Inside was a lock of hair. I immediately recognized the intertwined blue ribbons. "Laura always wore her hair like this, just to remind you we're not messing around," he said, watching my reaction. "This time it was just a little snip while you were sleeping." That night I cried myself to sleep, biting my fist to keep from making noise. It wasn't the fear of beatings that broke me, but the cruel realization that I was trapped in a system that would use me until it destroyed me. Every act of resistance was not only futile but also endangered those I loved most. I went from a student dreaming of becoming an engineer to a sentinel of terror. From a child with a future to a prisoner of a system that was destroying my own community. In less than a month, my life, as I knew it, had been ripped from me. There were no more dreams of a future, only the harsh reality of being a pawn in a game I'd never asked to play. I was trapped, but at the same time, I felt an illusory freedom. The freedom to walk the streets, to see people, but never to be a part of them again. My spirit, broken by fear and pain, now served only to keep those I loved safe. Or so I thought. The truth is, at that moment, I had already lost so much that I barely knew what was left. And what remained was a silent struggle to find a way out that, no matter how hard I searched, seemed ever more distant. During my first months in captivity, something in me changed profoundly. When I finally met the commander in person, he surprised me by saying, "After 2 months, your role has changed. You're no longer just a number." He was a seemingly ordinary man in his 50s, always wearing glasses and discreet, expensive yet simple clothes. Nothing in his manner betrayed the cruelty he carried within. He announced that I would have more responsibilities, but for me, that meant entering an even more dangerous cycle, becoming a human mule and then a karanka, terms I only understood in all their brutality later. I was taught to carry false bottom backpacks stuffed with packages. The rule was clear. If someone stopped you, you had to look like an ordinary young man with nothing wrong with you. If they discovered you, you were never to admit seeing us. The load always seemed small, but the fear grew with every step. I walked through military checkpoints with my heart pounding so hard it felt like the soldiers could hear it. It was during this period that the worst began. To endure endless 36-hour shifts, we were injected with methamphetamine. The first time I tried to resist, but a firm man held me down while another injected the needle. "Everyone goes through it," he said with a cold smile. "At first you hate it, then you need it." The shock was brutal. Heat burned up my arm, rising until it exploded in my head. I fell to my knees, gasping, my heart pounding. I couldn't sleep. I could barely eat. My mind raced. When the effects wore off, I vomited until I bled. I shook uncontrollably, and the tears flowed uncontrollably. Over time, my body adapted. Not that the pain lessened, but I learned to live with it, to function within that hell. The drug became a constant shadow, a familiar demon that destroyed my body and soul with cruel precision. Jose, a boy from Matamoros who had been in the organization for almost a year, explained to me how it all worked. He was only 17, but he looked much older, with a tired body and a watchful gaze. He said his cousin had been recruited at 13 and had lasted 3 years before being used as bait in a confrontation with the military. They say he was shot 42 times. Jose told me about the horrific journey that awaited us. We started as hawks, then mules, then decoys. If he survived and proved loyal, he could be trained for something more permanent in the organization. But most never made it that far. One night, after an exhausting shift, something happened that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. They brought in a tied-up man, a teacher, I heard. They said he talked too much to the students about the dangers of organized crime. The commander ordered, "Show the newbies." They lined up all of us, frightened young people in front of him. When they removed the hood, I recognized the face, distorted by suffering. It was Professor Martinez, the same one who taught history at the school next door. I'd seen him at school competitions, always cheering for his students. Now, he was unrecognizable, his face swollen, covered in bruises, his eyes nearly swollen shut. What struck me most that night wasn't the screams, nor the blood, but the look in Professor Martinez's eyes. There was something there, a profound weariness, the look of someone who has seen their own end and realized there is no hope. "The enemy is here," the commander shouted, circling the tied-up teacher. "Worse than the police, worse than the army. He poisons the young with ideas, makes them believe there's a way out, that there's life outside of here. He lies to them." What came next was calculated to erase any remaining humanity within us. All the boys in the safe house were forced to watch and participate. When it was my turn, the teacher was barely breathing. They placed a heavy object in my hand and ordered me to use it. I looked into his eyes, perhaps expecting him to tell me it was okay, that he forgave me, that he understood. But what I saw destroyed me. He recognized me. In a weak, almost muffled voice, he murmured my name. "Carlos." Your mother." Before he could finish, one of the henchmen, El Stifo, brutally struck him. The commander looked at me suspiciously. "Do you know him?" I trembled. I said no. "Then prove it." That phrase echoed within me like a sentence. From that moment on, something broke, a part of my soul that I never recovered. What I did next is something that still haunts me today. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, hearing that sound. No therapy, no words, could completely erase the weight of that moment. When it was all over, the rigid man walked past us, observing us one by one, reading our expressions like someone evaluating merchandise. Ramiro, a boy of just 14, couldn't contain his tears. The next morning, he was gone. No one asked what had happened. "You're not children anymore," the commander said coldly. "You're tools, and tools don't cry, don't feel, don't think. Tools are only good until they break. Then they're replaced." That night, lying on the thin mattress I shared with 2 other boys, I remembered my grandmother. She was the only true believer in my family. When I was little, I used to sit on her lap as she read, in a tremulous, sweet voice, verses from her scarred, worn Bible. "God is always with you," she would say, stroking my hair. In that moment, I wondered how such a God could exist and allow such cruelty. How could he see children being turned into monsters? I closed my eyes and for the first time in months, tried to pray. The words came rusty from my mouth. "Our Father who art in heaven." But I stopped. What kind of father could this be, capable of seeing everything and doing nothing? That night I didn't pray for salvation. I prayed not to wake up the next day. But God, for some reason I didn't yet understand, didn't answer. 6 months after my kidnapping, what they called a promotion came. The stern man led me to a back room. "Congratulations," he said with that smile that never reached his eyes. "You survived longer than most. Now you're going to be part of special operations." The room looked like a mausoleum of lost innocence. School uniforms hung in rows, from different schools, sizes, and colors. Some were still stained with blood. "Choose your size," the man ordered, flipping through a folder full of photographs. Each uniform told the story of someone who never returned home. The next morning, the commander gave me the new order. "Tomorrow you start as premium bait." The expression sounded almost elegant, but the meaning was terrifying. I discovered that the role of a bait was simple and cruel. Young people like me were used to deceive, distract, lure targets, or confuse authorities. We were the living trap, the human bait that lured the prey.
"When someone sees a student asking for help on the road, they still stop the car," he explained. "The wolf, one of the oldest operators. It's instinct, and we've learned to use people's instincts against them. Unlike the others, the wolf, he didn't seem to take pleasure in suffering. One night, while he was explaining the plan for an operation to me, I noticed him staring at a crumpled photograph. "Is this your son?" I asked, afraid of the reaction. He took a moment to answer.
"He was," he finally said. "He was your age. He died in an operation just like the one you're having tomorrow." For a moment, his gaze softened. "Let me give you some advice," he continued. "When you're out there, don't think about what you're doing. Don't think about who's going to die. Think about anything good. A soccer game, the smell of your house, a girl you used to like, chocolate ice cream. Get stuck in that until it's over." My first mission was at a fake checkpoint. They dressed me in a school uniform and put me in a van parked on the side of the highway between Reynosa and Monterrey, its lights flashing like an emergency vehicle. My role was simple: look hurt, scared, and signal when someone stopped to help. Then all hell would break loose. For 3 hours I stood there trembling. The drug was wearing off and fear was taking over. Every car that passed without stopping was a mixture of relief and despair, until an old pickup truck slowed down and pulled over. Inside was a family, a father, a mother, and 3 young children. The man got out of the car and came over to me, his eyes full of concern. "Are you okay, son? Do you want us to take you to the hospital?" His kindness hit me like a punch in the gut. For a second, I considered yelling for him to run, but then I saw the truck's headlights approaching in my rearview mirror. The signal had to be given. I ran my hand through my hair 3 times, the agreed-upon gesture. The sound that came next still haunts my dreams. The gunshots, the screams, the children's cries. I was told to keep my gaze fixed straight ahead, and I obeyed. But the soul sees what the eyes try to forget. That night I vomited until I fell unconscious. It wasn't just drug withdrawal anymore. It was my soul trying to rid itself of the guilt, the horror of what I had allowed to happen. Jose was beside me when I woke up, offering me a wet cloth to wipe my face. "You'll get used to it," he said hoarsely. "Either you get used to it, or you'll end up in a ditch." But I didn't want to get used to it. I didn't want to die inside. Every night I vowed I would find a way to escape, or die trying. Even so, each threat against my family, each new forced dose, each atrocity I witnessed, eroded a piece of my will. 3 months later, something happened. Something that didn't extinguish the hell, but ignited within me the first spark of faith, even if I didn't yet know how to recognize it. I was placed in a corner, pretending to be injured, in the blood-stained uniform they themselves had made look real. A woman stopped. From the insignia on her uniform, she looked like a nurse. She ran toward me, the instinct to help stronger than any fear. When our eyes met, something in my face made her hesitate. She backed away almost without realizing it. Too late. That night, while the others celebrated the operation, I couldn't accept what had happened. I snuck out to where they kept the prisoners and found her in a small room, tied up, conscious, but exhausted. The moment she saw me, a gleam of recognition flashed in her eyes. "You're the kid from the street." Her voice was hoarse, but firm. There was no accusation. There was pity. "They arrested you too, didn't they?" I couldn't speak. I could only nod. The tears I thought had dried flowed again without asking permission. "It's not your fault," she said, and it was as if someone had cracked a tightly locked door inside me. I brought her water, the only help I could offer without attracting attention. As she drank, I noticed a small crucifix around her neck. She followed my gaze and smiled, weak but genuine. "God is here right now," she whispered. "Especially now." 2 guards approached, and I had to leave. I never found out what they did to her afterward. I never asked. Deep down, I already knew the answer. The one who truly reminded me of my own humanity was Diego, a boy from Nuevo Laredo recruited around the same time. One night, when everyone was asleep, he pulled a crudely carved wooden cross from his sock. "My grandfather made it," he murmured, "before they took me. He assured me that as long as he had it, God could find me even in this place." Diego kept simple things that seemed useless, but were everything. He shared what little he had, comforted those who arrived frightened, and at night, whispered the childhood prayers he had learned at home. "We are not what they force us to be," he told me. "We are what we choose to be when no one is looking." He showed me the cross in the dim light that filtered through the barred window. A piece of wood sometimes seemed more valuable than gold. "Don't give up, Carlos," he said with a strength that pierced the numbness I carried. "Don't let them change you. Someday, we'll get out of here." 2 days later, Diego disappeared. The stiff man said he'd been transferred. We knew, once again, what that really meant. That same night, for the first time in months, I prayed the way my grandmother taught me, unsure if anyone was listening. I prayed with a mixture of fear and supplication, asking only for the strength to keep living. On March 17, 2023, almost 10 months after the kidnapping, I was summoned and told of a final mission, little knowing at the time that it would be my last. The plan was more elaborate than the previous ones. An ambush on a rival group's convoy, which was transporting important cargo along the Victoria-Monterrey highway. "This time you're not going alone," El Lobo said as he handed me a clean technical school uniform. The phrase sounded protective, but it was just strategy. We would be 4 decoys, spread out along the road. The other boys were almost strangers to me. Ernesto, 17, Miguel, 15, Antonio, just 13. We all had the same dejected look, the expression of someone who had lost more than just their childhood. They had lost hope. Tonio was the youngest. He had arrived a few weeks earlier, and still woke up crying for his mother. He was so young it hurt to look at him, but there were rumors he was the son of an officer who had betrayed the group. Revenge disguised as recruitment. Miguel had been a fisherman. The sea had given him strength, arms hardened by work, but it had also brought him a despair that made him bang his head against the wall, searching for some sensation other than fear. Ernesto was the veteran, almost 2 years there, more operations as bait than anyone else. A large scar crisscrossed his face, from ear to chin, a reminder of an operation gone wrong. He spoke little. When he did, his voice was dry, as if coming from far away. They instructed us with military precision. Each would occupy a different point, spread out along about 2 kilometers of the road. I would be at the last post, where the main ambush would unfold. They put headphones on us to hear orders and, once again, injected us with a larger dose of crystal than usual. "We need you to be extremely alert," the man said rigidly, as the needle plunged into my arm, already marked by old scars. "This operation is tolerant of mistakes." The ambush had been planned for weeks. According to intelligence, a rival convoy would transport valuable cargo along this isolated stretch of the Victoria-Monterey Highway. Our role was simple on paper and monstrous in practice. Create distractions, divide forces, clear the way for the main attack. As the drug flooded my body, I felt the old artificial clarity. Every sound became strangely clear, every smell sharper. My own heart seemed to beat with a painful rhythm. During the briefing, I noticed something different, tension between the leaders. El Lobo and the rigid man whispered in a corner. Clipped words drifted to me. Unverified information. Could be a trap. Fragments that hung like heavy clouds. In an organization accustomed to operating with certainty, this noise was a danger signal. But the crystal muffled my worries, transforming fear into a kind of resigned acceptance. It was already too late to back down. At dusk, we were driven to our separate locations. The road seemed to swallow the daylight. Dry bushes and dirt cast long shadows. They put me in a white pickup truck, its lights flashing, parked on a small rise. From there I could see, like vague points of light, the positions of the other boys. They seemed like vigils lit in a field of darkness. And amidst that forced stillness, I felt the weight of everything that was to come. "When the train stops, remember, you and Miguel hold your position. You're the last line, the final distraction if something goes wrong." The voice sounded cold and impersonal through the headset, but I felt the weight of every word. The next few hours dragged by with a torturous slowness. The crystal burned in my veins, keeping my senses too open. Every rustle of wind, every distant sound felt like a sign of danger. Through the headphones, I heard the other boys' nervous breathing, short, irregular, like my own. At 11:15 p.m., the voice of the wolf broke the silence. "Target approaching first point. Tonio, get ready." From where I was, I could see the lights of the vehicles coming slowly, slower than usual. They seemed cautious, which was odd. No one should have known about the ambush. "Something's wrong," he murmured. "The wolf. They're getting too far away. Hold your positions." Then around midnight, all hell broke loose. First, a short burst of gunfire. Then shouts, confused orders, static. "Change of plans," came the voice of the wolf came tensely, almost shouting. "It's not the train. I repeat, it's not the train. Prepare for a defensive." What came next was pure chaos. We were deceived. On the other side, there were no unsuspecting rivals, but rather an armed group already familiar with our every point. Through the headset, I heard the first attack hit Tonio's position, and then silence. Ernesto then tried to respond, but was drowned out by the sound of machine gun fire. "They've given us away," someone shouted. "It's a trap." It was at that moment that everything became clear. We were the disposable ones, the frowns. While we believed we were participating in something important, the true forces of the group had already fled, leaving us as a distraction. We were left to die. I had no more weapons, no strength, no hope. So I made the only gesture I could still remember. I knelt down on the truck seat and began to pray. They weren't pretty words. They were sobs. "God, if you are still there, if you still hear me, help me." That prayer came out dirty, confused, full of guilt. I don't deserve it, I know. But please, help me. If there's still a chance, get me out of here. Somehow. It was at that moment that the truck's headlights hit me head-on, blinding my eyes. I counted 5 vehicles. They quickly positioned themselves in formation, the men jumping out and pointing their guns at me. The first burst shattered the windshield, and the metallic sound echoed in my chest. I threw myself to the ground, covering my head with my arms, a futile but instinctive gesture. The bullets tore through the truck like paper, and then something strange happened. Amidst the noise, smoke, and panic, a deep peace enveloped me. It was the kind of peace that made no sense, the peace of someone who understands that the end has come and, for a second, is no longer afraid. I thought of my mother, my sister, my grandmother. I thought of Professor Martinez and all the people I had betrayed, directly or indirectly. For a moment, the pain gave way to a heavy silence, and within it something I hadn't expected emerged. Memories of faith. I remembered the nurse, the cross around her neck, Diego's voice telling me that God could find us even in hell. And there, surrounded by gunfire, I realized that somehow he really was finding me, not to save me from the fire that surrounded me, but to reach me inside, where I had been burning for so much longer. In the midst of that chaos, surrounded by gunfire and smoke, I thought of the few people who still saw something human in me, even when I could no longer see anything but guilt and darkness. "Forgive me," I whispered, curled up on the floor of the vehicle. "Please, God, forgive me." And then something happened that I could never explain logically. Amidst the deafening sound of the gusts, I heard the soft click of the passenger door opening. I thought it was the end, that one of the men had come to execute me personally. But what I saw knocked the breath from my lungs. An older man, maybe in his 60s, entered the vehicle as if the chaos outside didn't affect him. He wore simple blue overalls, like a mechanic's. The flickering light from the headlights made his calm, serene face shine, almost impossible to distinguish amid the tumult. "Don't be afraid," he said in a firm, gentle voice that carried above the sound of the bullets. "I've come for you." Without waiting for an answer, he lay on top of me, covering my body with his. I felt his weight, the heat of his presence, and the bullets kept whizzing by, ripping through the metal around him, hitting him, but he didn't move. No screams, no blood, nothing. "Who are you?" I managed to mumble, my voice breaking. "Someone who heard your prayer," he replied with supernatural calm. In the intermittent glare of the gunfire, I noticed something impossible. Where the bullets struck him, his skin glistened, reflecting a metallic light, as if his body itself were made of light, not flesh. But what struck me most wasn't that. It was his gaze. He looked at me with a compassion I had never felt before. Not a distant pity, but something that came from someone who understands suffering because they have experienced it firsthand. For what seemed like 3 long minutes, he stood there, my human shield. I could hear the whiz of bullets piercing the air, but none reached me. Then he spoke, amid a brief pause in the shooting. "You only need to carry what you've experienced, not what you can't change. Regret isn't the end, Carlos. It's the beginning of the road back." Those words pierced me in a way nothing ever had before. It was as if he saw everything, every crime, every act of cowardice, every fear, and yet he looked at me tenderly, recognizing the little humanity I still retained. When the gunshots died down, he leaned in and spoke very close to my ear. "When I tell you, you're going to climb out from under the truck, on the driver's side. You're going to run south and turn left. 5 miles from here, there's an old well, next to a mesquite tree. Hide there. Someone will find you at dawn." I was shaking so hard I could barely breathe. "I can't," I whispered. "They'll kill me as soon as I get out." "Don't go," he replied, with a smile that, for an instant, lit up the place like a ray of sunshine piercing an ashen sky. "I'll distract them. When I tell you now, you run, and don't look back. Whatever happens, don't look back." I stood frozen, trying to understand. How did he know about the well? How could he promise someone would find me? Who would sacrifice themselves for me? Me, who had destroyed so many lives. But in that moment, in the midst of the war, I realized something that was not of this world. That man was not there by chance. He was not just someone. He was an answer. When I realized what was happening, he looked directly into my eyes and said, with a calmness that disarmed any fear, "Carlos, your life has a greater purpose. You were not created to die like this. What you've lived so far is not the end. It's just the beginning." Before I could say anything, that man did the unthinkable. He stood up, opened the door, and stepped out of the vehicle, completely exposed. Instantly, the gunfire turned on him. But instead of running, he raised his voice in a scream that seemed to shake the very air. It was a voice that didn't come from this world. Seized by an impulse that overrode any instinct of fear, I slid under the truck and began to run, just as he had said. Behind me, the gunshots grew louder. Every fiber of my being begged me to look back, to see what was happening. But the memory of his voice, "Don't look back," held me tight. I ran through thorny bushes that tore at my skin and the fabric of my uniform. I ran across small, dry streams, stumbling over rocks, gasping for breath. The crystal still in my body gave me an unnatural strength, but what truly drove me was something else. The faith that, without realizing it, was being reborn within me. As I ran, memories came flooding back. I saw my mother's face that morning I was taken, my sister's smile playing with me in the yard, my grandmother's soft voice reading from her worn Bible and saying, "God never abandons his own." Amidst these images rose the horrors of what I had done, and amidst this turmoil, a question lingered. Who was I? Who am I? And who can I still be? It was as if, for the first time, I could see my entire life at once. The lost innocence, the fear, the guilt. And there, in the midst of it all, a chance, not to erase the past, but to live differently from now on. When the sound of gunfire finally faded, my legs gave out. I fell to my knees in the dust, exhausted, and that's when I realized something impossible. My shirt was torn by several bullet holes, 6, maybe more, but underneath, my skin was intact. No wound, no scratch. I touched the marks, trembling. The bullets had passed through the man's body and stopped, before touching me. I should have been dead, but I wasn't. I remembered, like a distant echo, the stories my grandmother used to tell about angels and deliverances. Stories I used to laugh at, saying they were just the consolation of simple people. But there, alone in the middle of the desert, I realized that perhaps those stories were the human way of trying to explain the inexplicable. I looked up at the starry sky and, in a hoarse voice, whispered, "Thanks." I didn't know if I was talking to God, to that man, or to both, but for the first time in a long time, what I felt was real. I got up and continued walking, guided only by the stars and the promise of a well of water that I had never seen, but now believed existed. Each step was a mixture of pain and hope, and for the first time in months, fear was no longer what drove me. It was faith. The effects of the glass were wearing off, and with it came pain, a pain so deep it seemed to come from the soul. Every muscle burned, every step was a battle, but I couldn't stop. I kept stumbling forward in the darkness until, after what seemed like an eternity, I saw in the distance a lone tree, bent against the starry sky. Beside it, an ancient stone structure, a well, exactly as the man had described. My legs finally gave out. I collapsed against the tree and huddled near the well, shivering with cold and fear. My body began to react to the lack of the drug. Convulsions, nausea, a despair that tore at my core. I vomited until nothing remained, cried like a lost child, and saw faces in the shadows that might have been memories, might have been hallucinations. Amidst that agony, one question wouldn't leave me alone. Who was that man? How did he know about the well? How could he withstand the bullets without falling? As the first ray of light broke the horizon, I heard the distant sound of an engine. Instinct told me to hide. I held my breath, expecting the worst. Then, a hoarse but calm voice cut through the silence. "Is anyone there? Don't be afraid, boy. I've come to help you." A man appeared, plain-looking, perhaps in his 50s. Sunburned skin, trucker's clothes. "My name is Ernesto," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "I transport cattle between Victoria and Monterey. I never stop here, but today I felt I had to. Something inside me told me someone needed help. I came out of my hiding place, trembling. When he saw me, he put his hand to his mouth in shock. My God, boy. What did they do to you? I couldn't answer. I just cried. A cry that came from deep within, from the place where I'd kept all my fear, guilt, and pain. He didn't insist. He just wrapped me in a blanket, helped me into the truck, and gave me water. During the drive, the withdrawal symptoms returned with a vengeance. I was shaking, sweating, and screaming. Ernesto kept his hands firmly on the steering wheel, and from time to time said with a calmness that calmed me, "Hang in there, kid. You'll understand why you survived." At one point, he looked at my torn shirt and muttered almost to himself, "Those marks, those bullets should have gone right through you. Someone's up there watching you, kid." We arrived in Monterey when the sun was already high. Ernesto took me to a small, simple church with a sign that read, Esperanza Community Center. There Ruben was waiting for me, a soft-spoken man with a firm gaze. "You're safe here," he said. "No one will find you." In the following days, my body waged war against me. The withdrawal symptoms came like waves of fire, and during many of them, I wanted to die. But Ruben and his wife, Letitia, who was a nurse, never gave up on me. They slept little, prayed a lot. They fed me patiently, even when I refused everything. "Why are you helping me?" I asked one day between groans. Letitia smiled, with a tenderness I hadn't seen in a long time. "Because God never gives up on anyone," he replied. "And until he gives up, neither will we." A week later, when I could hold his gaze without shame or fear, Ruben introduced me to Gabriel, a former federal agent who now dedicated his life to rescuing young people from the clutches of organized crime. That encounter would change the course of my story forever. Gabriel listened to my story attentively, and then spoke calmly but firmly. "Your situation is delicate. Your family is at risk, and you are witnessing crimes that many would not tolerate. But we can help. With your help, we were able to rescue my mother and sister from Reynosa through an underground protection racket. The operation was planned down to the last detail. They were discreetly intercepted as they left the supermarket, quickly taken to an armored vehicle, and then transferred to Monterrey. From there, they continued to a distant state where no one knew them. There, they received new identities, psychological support, and a real chance to start over. The reunion was a shock. My mother seemed to have aged a decade during my absence. Laura, my sister, had developed selective mutism, a silence that spoke louder than words. When they saw me, the fear on their faces struck me deeply. They feared the strange person I had become. "They kidnapped me, Mom," I managed to say through tears. "They forced me to do horrible things." Little by little, we rebuilt our bonds. My mother, with quiet strength, accepted our new reality and did her best to keep hope alive. Laura, little by little, began to talk to me again. The physical wounds took months to heal, but it was the invisible scars that consumed me internally. For long nights, fear and guilt haunted me in endless nightmares. One of those nights, I confided in Ruben. "I have blood on my hands. How am I going to live with this?" He looked at me with a patience that only years of struggle can give, and replied, "Guilt is just the beginning of the journey. Redemption comes later, but it can't stop there. You were kidnapped, imprisoned by monsters who used you as a tool. Now, you have the choice to decide who you want to be." The real turning point came when I started working with other young people who had gone through similar experiences. Gabriel created a program where former victims, once stabilized, could become mentors for those just starting out on their journey to recovery. Transforming my pain into helping others was what strengthened me most. With calm and much struggle, I began to put the pieces of my life back together. I went back to school, first at home with tutors, then in special programs for vulnerable youth. I sought therapy, joined support groups, and gradually found a fragile but real peace in the faith my grandmother always tried to instill in me. It wasn't a path without setbacks. There were setbacks, despair, and doubts. But in my darkest moments, I remembered that man in the blue jumpsuit. His inexplicable sacrifice gave me the strength to carry on. Today, 2 years after my rescue, I live in a different city, with a new name. I decided to tell my story not for revenge or fame, but because thousands of children still live trapped in the same nightmare I lived. According to human rights organizations, more than 4,500 minors are used as bait every year in Mexico, with the states of Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, Guerrero, and Michoacán leading the way. And worst of all, 60% of these victims never appear in official statistics. They disappear without a trace, become mere numbers in files, or end up in clandestine graves, nameless and without justice. This is the open secret that Mexico insists on ignoring. Children and adolescents are not collateral damage of drug trafficking. They are tools used deliberately for their strategic value. A man with a gun generates fear. A young man in a school uniform doesn't. He inspires trust, and that's exactly why we're chosen. "This isn't an accident," Gabriel explained to me. "It's a deliberate strategy. Minors are easier to mold. They go unnoticed in places where armed adults would raise suspicions, and if they're caught, the legal consequences are much less severe. It's cruel, but it's coldly calculated. The scariest thing is the silence. Families remain silent out of fear. The police often ignore or downplay the situation. And the media, When they're not intimidated, they're bought off. Stories become footnotes in newspapers, lost among statistics that no one reads. For a long time I asked myself, why me? Why did I survive when so many others disappeared? Why was I given a second chance? The answer didn't come suddenly, nor as a heavenly revelation. It formed slowly, like an ember that doesn't die even beneath the ashes. What happened that night? The man who appeared out of nowhere, who endured the gunfire, who covered me with his own body and gave me instructions no one else could know, that wasn't ordinary. When I told Ruben everything, he listened attentively, and then showed me some passages from the Bible. Ancient stories, but they seemed to describe exactly what I experienced. Angels who appear in moments of despair, messengers who appear when all seems lost. You said he didn't bleed, Ruben commented, and that his skin glowed in the moonlight, that his eyes had something different. That's not strange. It's sacred. I'm not here to convince anyone of miracles. I can only tell you what I saw. And in the dead of night, when I needed it most, someone or something appeared and changed everything. Today, I live under a different name, in a different city, but I quietly collaborate on rescue and recovery projects for young people who have been through the same thing as me. Thanks to my testimony, we've been able to find and free 11 teenagers so far. I talked to parents, teachers, and community leaders. The signs are there, but they're easy to ignore. Expensive gifts without explanation, new friends no one knows, sudden mood swings, unexcused absences. A single afternoon missing can be the beginning of hell. My name is, or was, Carlos Mendoza. I was taken from my school in Reynosa at 16. I was used as human bait. I saw and did things no one should see, much less experience. And I tell this story not for revenge, nor for attention. I tell it because deep down in this hole called drug trafficking, there are still children waiting to be found. On days when the weight of memory threatens to crush me, I close my eyes and return to that night. I remember the man in the blue jumpsuit, what he said to me before he disappeared. Live to tell what you saw. That's what I'm doing. Speaking for those still stuck in the dark. One day Mexico will look at these wounds. One day, no child will be treated as a disposable part of a war they never chose. Until then, I'll keep this light burning, because all the darkness in the world can't extinguish the light of a single candle. And that candle now is me.